All right, so last time we talked about graphing points, but now we're talking about graphing lines. So we're going to take some of the ideas from graphing points and we're going to use it to graph lines. Okay, so here are the steps to graphing lines. There are essentially 5 steps. The 5 steps are: step 1, pick any 3 x's we want. Any 3 x's we want in the whole world. Step 2, evaluate y equals for x equals. In other words, plug in x to get y. Step 3, fill in the y values on a table. Step 4, make ordered pairs. Again, they have an x and a y because every ordered pair has an x and a y, and graph them. And step 5, draw a line through the points. Let's take our first example. Example number 1, we're going to graph y equals 3x minus 1. So step 1, we can pick any 3x values. So I can pick any 3 numbers I want for my x. I could pick 300,000. I could pick the square root of 27. I could pick 1,500,367,000,000.53. But I probably shouldn't pick those numbers. Instead, I should probably pick some easy numbers like 0, 1, and 2 because they're kind of small and they're easy. And if I like negative numbers, I can pick -1 or -2 if I like negative numbers. Those are good too. It's best to keep the numbers small. If you get big numbers, you're going to have big problems. So we want to have small numbers. If you ever have trouble using a number, if you start trying to plug a number in and your brain starts getting all discombobulated and confused, just use a different number. If the point goes off the graph, if you wind up getting the number 13 and the graph only goes to 10, try a different number. So if you're ever having trouble with a number, pick a different number to plug in. Just scratch that number out that you did use and just pick a whole different number. All right. In our case, let's say we picked 0, 1, and 2. So the first thing we'll do is we'll make ourselves a little table like this. You'll basically have an X and a Y, and you'll have some blanks right here. And you'll have an X, and you'll put 0, 1, 2 down. All right? Now, we don't know what Y is yet. We got to work that out. So we'll basically put our X's down 0, 1, and 2 for X. And then what we'll do is we'll plug the X values you pick into the formula y equals 3x minus 1. So instead of me writing the X here, I'm going to write a 0. So y equals 3 times 0 minus 1. Not 3 times x, 3 times 0. 3 times 0 is, of course, just 0. Minus 1 is -1. 3 times 1 minus 1 is 3 minus 1 equals 2. And 3 times 2 minus 1 is 6 minus 1 equals 5. So you see that all I'm doing is I'm basically plugging in for x so that I can kind of see what happens if I plug in a 0. I get a -1. What happens if I plug in a 1? I get a 2. Plug in a 2, I get a 5. And then I fill in the things that go along with them. So 0 gives me a -1, 1 gives me a 2, 2 gives me a 5. And so I've basically evaluated y equals, and I fill in the y values on the table. So we basically have taken care of steps 2 and 3 in one go. Now we're on to step 4. Step 4 says to make ordered pairs. Every ordered pair has an x and a y. Every ordered pair has an x and a y. So that means that this is a pair. This is the x, that's the y, 0, -1. This is the x, that's the y, 1, 2. This is the x, that's the y, 2, 5. This is the ordered pairs you get from this chart. Now let's graph these ordered pairs. All right, so 0, -1, we said it was down here. It's on the y-axis. We know that because the x value is 0. Then we go over 1. So start the origin. We go over 1, up 2. That gives us 1, 2. We go over 2, up 5. Gives us 2, 5. We have graphed the points. We draw a line in between them. If we need to, we get a ruler so that we can make our line straight if we need to make the line straight. Okay. This is example 2. It says example 1. I'm sorry, it's example 2. So this is our second example, and we're going to graph something with a fraction. So it's the same 5 steps. We're just gonna have to think about it a little differently. Same 5 steps though. All right. The steps to graphing lines. Pick any 3 x's. Plug in the x's to get y's. Fill in the y values. Make ordered pairs. Draw a line. Now, remember, we can pick any 3 x's we want. We can pick 120 million. We can pick the square root of 47. We can pick negative 3.578. But we don't want to do that because those are terrible numbers, and we don't want terrible numbers. And we have a second problem. We have a fraction in the problem, and we don't want a fraction in the problem. But there it is. Therefore, we should exercise caution and be a little more picky about what numbers we pick. So let's look at the equation. Y equals 1/2 x plus 1. We have a 1/2 in the equation. So what's going to happen is whatever we do is going to get divided by 2, right? Because 2 is on the bottom. That's what happens when you have a 2 on the bottom, you divide by it. If we pick a number like 5, you'll have 5 divided by 2. You'll put it in your calculator, and you'll get 2.5, which is a decimal. And that's going to make a whole lot of problems. We want to make this as easy as possible. So we don't want things that give us decimals. That will not help us. So instead, we want multiples of 2, because multiples of 2 will divide easily by 2. Like, for example, let's look down here. We want multiples of 2, like numbers like 0, 2, 4, and 6, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. These are all really good numbers. Again, 8's probably a little too big because it's 8. So let's pick some small numbers. 0, 2, and 4 works. I mean, in fact, we can even pick negative numbers if we like them. So we pick 3 numbers. We make an x and a y. We fill in our x's, 0, 2, 4. So we plug in 0. We have 0, 2, and 4. We pick those numbers. Those numbers we just picked. We didn't really have to do anything. We just picked them. We picked them. Half of 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. Half of 2 is 1, plus 1 is 2. Half of 4 is 2, plus 1 is 3. And we get 1, 2, and 3. So we have filled in the numbers. So now we have done basic step 1, step 2, and step 3. Now we go to step 4. Step 4 is we make ordered pairs. Voila. 0, 1, 2, 2, and 4, 3. Every ordered pair has an x and a y. And the last step, we graph those suckers. So here we are, we graphed them. You gotta practice graphing points. It's a whole deal. It's super important you know how to graph a point. If you don't know how to graph a point, go back, look over the homework, redo some of the homework, review the homework. If you don't know how to review the homework, send me an email and ask me how to do that. Because you have to know how to be able to graph points. If you don't know how to graph points, you will do very poorly on our next test. So it is imperative that you learn how to graph points. You go to YouTube and you look it up. You ask a friend, a family member, or somebody how to graph points. You send me an email and ask me how to graph points. It's very important to know how to graph points. So we graph the points and we draw a line. So that's done. So voila, that's how we graph lines. It's the same set of steps every time. You need to practice a bunch. Now our next lesson is going to be, this is section 3.3. We're going to have a different kind of line. It's going to be a different way of writing it out. So it's going to be a little different, but I will distinguish it when we get there. Those lines will be a little bit different, but we'll get there when we get there. All right, let me give you 3 tips. Tip number 1, if you plot the points and they don't make a straight line, you made a mistake. So if you get that shape when you drew it, or you get this shape, or you get that shape, or you get any weird, funky shape that isn't a line, you've messed up. So go back, check your math, make sure that you draw your points correctly, because you might have got the right numbers and not plot them correctly. Kind of go back through, start at the beginning, make sure everything is right, and fix it. Because if you don't get a straight line from those 3 points, you made a mistake. Number 2, if you're not comfortable using a particular number, then use a different number. If you don't want to use 0, don't use 0. Use 1. If you don't want to use -2, use +2. Use a number you're comfortable with. If you want to use 5,000 and that works for you, use 5,000. Use a number that works for you. And tip number 3, keep your x values small. You do want to kind of have smallish numbers. 1, 2, and 3 is a really good one. 0, 1, 2 is a really good one. And again, big numbers make big problems. The bigger the number, the more it gets complicated. Now you're doing timetables and stuff. You don't want to be doing timetables. You just want to keep numbers really small, keep the math really small. All right. And that is how we graph a line. Thank you for your time.